Yeah, you were a master of extortion, and then in and out of jail, and then you made a lot of money with drugs.
In the 60s, I was approached by a group of Americans that were the first Americans that were to bring in Mexican Colombian. They had Mexican Colombian pipeline for marijuana. Right. They were also manufacturers of LSD, which had not come to Canada, but had been popular through Timothy Leary down in California, and it was the movement of the hippie movement, I guess, for lack of a better terminology. The young people were rebelling against a corrupt government, and Vietnam and Watergate and all of these things were happening. And they came to me and they said, we understand that you're the guy that controls the west end of the city. You know everybody there is. You know all the bikers. You know all the main crews in the city. We have a product that will make you more money than you ever dreamed of. And I said, well, I'm interested in that. And he said, okay, we understand you never lie and you never break your word. Give us your word that you'll give us 1 week of your time and we'll show you how the scam runs. And I said, okay, you got it. What's the scam? And he said, drugs. And I laughed at them. I said, the only people who do drugs are the losers in the inner city. There isn't enough. I supply half the bars in the city of Toronto.
Yeah, you didn't understand that there was a whole new sociological phenomenon that was about to emerge.
So he took me the next day to a middle, and this is important for people to understand in the drug epidemic and how we're never going to take it until we understand this premise. He took me to a regular high school. I had like somewhere between a grade 3 or grade 5 education. I'd never met anybody who went to high school, let alone graduated. And he took me to a middle-class high school, and I watched these kids who were all dressed like Pat Boone and penny loafers and clean cut and happy and books. And I said, what are we doing here? He said, watch, this is what we did in the States. And he went to his smoking pit and he started giving out weed on Monday. And on Wednesday, he started giving out acid, LSD. And on Friday, when the kids came, he told them no more freebies. And they all dug into their pockets and bought it. Yeah. On Saturday, I went back to my guys and said, this is the best scam in the world. These kids gave it to their friends. Then they sold it to their friends. They pulled it together. I said, and they never reported anybody. I said, all we have to do is put a dealer in every town, every city in this country, and some kid from the high school will come and find the drugs and bring it back to these stupid kids who have more money than brains, who get more money from their parents than they get attention. I'm telling you, this is a business. Well, in 1984, I was arrested for a $40 million drug bust, laboratory,
yeah, it was in Quebec,
manufacturing, right? In Quebec. Yeah. But I was also co-leader of one of Canada's most powerful drug crime families. We generated about $130 million a year. I was hooked in with Gurdav Sangha from India, which is the largest exporter of hashish in the world. So I was probably at one time the #1 importer of hashish into this country, all to the middle-class kids who have the high disposable income, who can buy drugs with their lunch money. And so the reality of drugs and drug dealing, it's the lower socioeconomic class kids that use it as a vehicle, who never think they're going to live past 21 years old, to get something they don't think they're ever going to have legitimately. They're never going to be able to go to high school or university. So this is the vehicle that they use. It's the easiest crime to commit. And you have some middle-class kid at a high school, they never report it, they never bring it to the authorities. The drug dealers in the high schools are the kids themselves who get it from a drug dealer outside of it. That was the premise in 1967. In 1984, it was still the premise, and it's still the premise today. And unless we get to understand that we need to deal with that middle-class segment of our youth in the schools, in the middle schools, to stop the demand for it, somebody will always bring the supply in. And if government tries to get into it, somebody will black market it anyway. And so what we need to deal with is the demand. The other thing we need to deal with is guys like who I was. I mean, I was a criminal. I didn't have any conscience. I didn't mind polluting the minds and bodies of children across North America for my drugs to make money. And often people say, well, what could the system have done different with you? Well, when I first went to prison at 17 as a man in the penitentiary system, they probably should have given me 25 years because I had no intentions of ever changing at that time. The prison system ought to be set up to do #1, first thing, protect the minnows from the barracudas.
Which means?
Means stop the victimizers from predators' behavior on the victims. Prison was set up to protect our citizens, to protect the public from the people who want to hurt them. And so we must always remember that prison has, the first legitimate state of prison is to make sure that the bad guys are contained from hurting the good people. And so, you know, if you're going to have major drug dealers and you're going to give them a slap on the wrist of 3 or 4 or 5 years, they're going to come back out and be major drug dealers again. I mean, that's not going to stop. It's a game. And so to get the drug epidemic, we need to really get down to deal with the kids and make sure that the bad guys have the appropriate sentences and are confined from going. I mean, in 1984 when I was arrested, Jim, I was on a national parole.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was still serving a prison sentence.
Yeah, and the interesting thing you did again and again and again and again, as you were thrown into every kind of prison situation, you would cut deals with the the prosecutors, with the wardens. And the more guilty you were of horrible crimes, the more status you had in the prison. You were treated like a VIP.
Well, I became a power broker in the prison system. Guards don't run prisons. Convicts run prisons. The guards keep the convicts in the prison. It's impossible for 35 men or 70 men on a shift to control 700.
But you would compromise the cook, for instance, and get him prostitutes and
blackmail them
and blackmail him.
Yeah.
And so you got really good food and you got a lot of favors
and a lot of whiskey around New Year's.
Right, a lot of whiskey around New Year's. I mean, I'm reading your book and I'm saying, how did this guy do this? Well, the point was you had a whole infrastructure of support outside of the prison in terms of your criminal friends, right?
Well, it's